as well. I don't see the red button.
I started. I've already started.
Tar Meher Baba ki Jai. Universal prayer. O Parvardigar, the preserver and protector of all, you are without beginning and without end, non-dual, beyond comparison, and none can measure you. You are without color, without expression, without form, and without attributes. You are unlimited and unfathomable, beyond imagination and conception, eternal and imperishable. You are indivisible and none can see you, but with eyes divine, you always were, you always are, and you always will be. You are everywhere, you are in everything, and you're also beyond everywhere and beyond everything. You are in the firmament and in the depths. You are manifest and unmanifest on all planes and beyond all planes. You are in the three worlds and also beyond the three worlds. You are imperceptible and independent. You are the creator, the Lord of Lords, the knower of all minds and hearts. You are omnipotent and omnipresent. You are knowledge infinite, power infinite, and bliss infinite. You are the ocean of knowledge, all knowing, infinitely knowing, the knower of the past, the present, and the future, and you are knowledge itself. You are all merciful and eternally benevolent. You are the soul of souls, the one with infinite attributes. You are the Trinity of truth, knowledge, and bliss. You are the source of truth, the ocean of love. You are the ancient one, the highest of the high. You are Prabhu and Parameshwar. You are the beyond God and the beyond God also. You are Parabrahma, Allah, Ilahi, Yazdan, Ahurmaz, and God the Beloved. Your name is the only one worthy of worship. Given by Meher Baba on 13 September 1953, Avatar Meher Baba ki Jai. Prayer for sorry, prayer of repentance. This prayer was dictated by Meher Baba in 1952. We repent, O God, most merciful, for all our sins, for every thought that was false or unjust or unclean, for every word spoken that ought not to have been spoken, for every deed done that ought not to have been done. We repent for every deed and word and thought inspired by selfishness, and for every deed and word and thought inspired by hatred. We repent especially for every lustful thought and every lustful action, for every lie, for all hypocrisy, for every promise given but not fulfilled, and for all slander and backbiting. Most especially also, we repent for every action that has brought ruin to others, for every word and deed that has given others pain, and for every wish that pain should be for others. In your unbounded mercy, we ask to forgive us, O God, for all the sins committed by us, and to forgive us for our constant failures to think and speak according to your will. Prayers for Baba lovers and Mandali. Beloved God, help us all to love you more and more and more and more and still yet more until we become worthy of union with you, and help us all to hold fast to Baba's Daman till the very end. Avtar Meher Baba ki jai.
की जय अवतार मेहर बाबा की जय अवतार मेहर बाबा की जय
I just wanted to add to hold fast to beloved Baba's Daman till the very end.
Sure. Jai Baba.
You know.
So let's Yeah, so before we go, let's see where we are from a tracking standpoint. So we are now down to, we finished three parts of reincarnation and karma. So we do part four and part five, and then get to the two chapters on the problem of sex and the sanctification of married life. Then continue with six and seven, right? The total seven parts of reincarnation and karma. So let's take four and see the um, aspects that are covered. So it starts with sex, a form of duality, sex in subhuman forms before human form, psyche modified by sex, male and female incarnations. Specific incarnations are determined by sanskaras, and the idea of Eastern births and Western births, change of sphere, and cycles of existence. So let's jump in. Yeah, let's get. You want to read for some time, and then we can always rotate.
Yeah, okay.
Sanjay has just sent a message. Not well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
So this is reincarnation and karma, part four, specific conditions of incarnation. The individualized soul has its beginning and source in the infinite, formless, sexless, and invisible being of God, who is beyond all forms of duality or evolution. With the beginning of the individualized soul, there is beginning of duality and evolution to the specific form of duality consisting in the distinction and attraction based upon sex makes its appearance at a later stage of evolution. My apologies, uh, Baba. The subtopic is sex, a specific form of duality. Duality exists as soon as there is subject and object, a center of consciousness, however dim, and its environment. Sex, on the other hand, is a specific kind of bodily attraction that presupposes differentiation of forms, a specific kind of entanglement of the psyche with the forms, and specific expressions of life and energy. Next subtopic is sex in subhuman forms. In the mineral kingdom, there are no sexual distinctions. In the kingdom of plants and trees, the bodily differentiation of sex with specialized biological functions have come into existence. Plants and trees do not generate sexual consciousness, since the development of consciousness in plants and trees is rudimentary and its expressions are not influenced by these bodily differentiation. Contact between the male and the female in plants and trees is due to their being fixed in the ground, not direct but only indirect through the intermediate agencies of winds, bees, and so forth. Therefore, from the standpoint of evolution of forms, sexual differentiation may be said to have begun to emerge even at the level of plants and trees. But from the point of view of their own consciousness, they cannot be said to have any sexual distinctions because their consciousness of duality is not in any way colored by sex.
So basically, even at the level of the plant, the agency is provided by wind and bees and so forth, which is basically towards procreation through seeds and germination of those seeds, and before germination, planting of those seeds and so on and so forth, right? So that's the point that's being made.
Yeah, and another point which comes out is that the the level of consciousness, uh, this is mentioned, is at the rudimentary levels,
Yeah.
which we know it gets fully developed when we become a human being.
Yes.
So we should value the life we get in this incarnation or reincarnation of the human life and use it properly.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the next subtopic is psych modified by sex. In the evolution
No.
of, actually, sorry,
No. The previous one. Yes.
sorry. In the evolution of sexual duality, plants and trees stand midway between minerals which have no sexual differentiation, and the birds and animals which have it in its complete form. Just before the soul incarnates in the first human form, it arrives at full consciousness and energy in its last animal form, which it then drops to take a human body. The reincarnation of the individualized soul through human forms is preceded by its successive incarnation in the subhuman forms.
So the tree and plants are basically in the middle. And of course, once you come into the animal form, it's very well defined. The uh, idea of uh, sex and procreation and sexual attraction and so on. Yeah.
Psyche modified by sex. In animals, sex not only expresses itself through the bodily differences and activities, but is a deep-rooted factor that affects consciousness. Since humans inherit their bodies as well as consciousness from highly evolved animals like apes, humans also find themselves subject to sexual duality. In humans, sex is so completely developed that it's no longer a matter of merely of the body. It substantially modifies the psyche, which seeks its expression through the body in accordance with whether the form is male or female. Next subtopic, male and female incarnations. After attaining the human form, as a rule, there is no reversion to animal forms. Cases of retrogression to subhuman forms are special and rare exceptions. Once the soul has attained human status, the normal course is to go through countless reincarnation in the human form itself. The human form may sometimes be male and sometimes female, according to the sanskaras and the spiritual requirements of the soul. The female form has the special prerogative that even the sadhus in the avatar have to be born to the female form. The male form has a prerogative that the majority of the sadgurus appear in the male form. Although women can become saints and masters, the avatar always appears in the male form.
Okay. The important point that's made here.
Yes. And we also have, I mean, this reminds me of Mother Teresa, who's like, uh, in the, especially in Calcutta and eastern part of Eastern India, she was a, she has done a lot of work for the poor. This is just a passing reference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Specific
Uh,
incarnation determined by sanskaras, the next subtopic. The general advantages and handicaps of an incarnation are always determined by the specific sanskaras the individual soul has accumulated in the past. The needs involved in the further development of the soul are related to the nature of its accumulated sanskaras. Therefore, these accumulated sanskaras really determine whether the soul takes its incarnation on the earth in the east or in the west, in the male form or in the female form, in one cycle of existence or in another. The facilities awarded, sorry, the facilities afforded by a specific incarnation are dependent not only on whether an incarnation is in the east male form or female form, but also whether it takes place in one cycle of existence or another cycle of existence, and whether it matches the tenor of earthly life in the eastern hemisphere or in the western hemisphere. East and west.
Idea of east and west, again, important distinction that's brought out between the why births happen in east and why births happen in the west.
And talking about the hemisphere, people study in one hemisphere, like the east hemisphere, and then they migrate to the west in
Yeah,
one life itself. So, I mean, it's all very, uh, it's all as very specific to individuals, but they're different strokes for different folks.
yeah.
Generally speaking, today on the whole, the East has developed more along spiritual lines than material lines, with the result that the Eastern mind has a more spontaneous aspiration for God. The West, on the whole, has developed more along material lines than along spiritual lines, with the result that the Western mind has a more spontaneous urge toward intellectual and artistic things. An incarnation in the East usually brings with it a greater tendency toward spiritual life than in the West. And an incarnation in the West usually brings with it a greater tendency toward material life than one in the East. But the soul has to experience the material as well as the spiritual aspects of life before it is free from the fetters of a divided life. Therefore, the same soul has to incarnate in the East as well as in the West. Next subtopic, change of sphere. If a soul has had many successive incarnations in the East and then takes an incarnation in the West, it carries with it the impressions of its lives in the East, and through living, and though living in the West, it leads a life essentially in conformity with the Eastern pattern.
I think you have to read the whole line again. You replaced east for west.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry. Yeah, I will read again. Yes.
If a soul.
If a soul has had many successive incarnations in the East and then takes
Oh,
an
again you said east.
yeah, I said East only. Successive incarnation in the East. Sorry,
No.
I'll read again. It says in the first time East and then West. So I'm reading the first line.
Oh,
If a
okay, okay. No, but I
see,
thought you were reading the second one. Okay, go ahead.
just one second. I'm sorry, Jay Baba. I'm sorry, Baba. And sorry. I'll
Yeah.
just read again. I'll
Yeah.
read it
You're
slowly.
starting, wait a minute. You're starting from the beginning of the paragraph with the subtitle change of sphere.
Yeah, I'm starting from the
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
paragraph with the subtitle Change of Sphere. If a soul has had many successive incarnations in the East and then takes an incarnation in the West, it carries with it the impressions of its life in the East, and though living in the West, it leads a life essentially in conformity with the Eastern pattern. If a soul has had many successive incarnations in the West and then takes an incarnation in the East, it carries with it the impressions of its lives in the West, though living in the East. It leads a life that is in conformity with the Western pattern. Sometimes one may thus have, for example, a European soul in an Indian form or an Indian soul in a European form. It must be borne in mind that distinction is only relative to past incarnation and sanskaras, and that the soul as such is beyond such distinctions.
So
So this
basically,
is quite profound,
yeah, go ahead. You first.
and karma has joined.
Yeah, you were saying something else, I thought.
Yeah, I'm saying that it's like a seesaw. I can, what analogy comes to my mind, although it's not in this book, but it comes to my mind is the seesaw. So we may have had incarnation in the West, and we carry the, you know, we lead a life that is in conformity with the Western pattern. And similarly, if we have had, uh, you know, several incarnations in the East, then we carry the life that is in conformity with the Eastern pattern, although we have been born in the West. So it's like a seesaw, if I can say.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
moving ahead.
all that we understand that I mean everything is linked only to sanskaras, and the alternation of the east and the west is basically based on the sanskaras.
Yeah, and also it says, if you go to the last line, that it says that the soul as such is beyond such distinctions. The soul is, you know, uh, is not moved. It's a very pure, divine thing, the soul, and all these things are very uh, the material world only, the east or the west. But the soul is unmoved by such distinctions.
Yeah.
Jay Baba, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I have Wi-Fi. I'm still going to get a new phone, hopefully today or tomorrow. We'll talk about that later. I
Sure.
need some advice on that. But so now, as he said, the soul has no distinction. Again, the soul's consciousness, we know that the soul, self, spirit, which are basically the same thing, spoken in different terminologies based on aspects or context of the situation. All of us, whether you are a human being or non-human being, has a soul, right? Right from the subatomic particle, has a soul, which basically has different degrees of consciousness, in different kingdoms. So even within the human kingdom, even though we call it human consciousness, Karthik's consciousness, soul consciousness, Ashok's soul consciousness, Kama soul's consciousness are unique, as we call it, the DNA sanskaric fingerprint. But the top-down approach to look at this paragraph is that there is a divine theme that is going on. That is what we have understood from God Speaks, that the whole of existence is like a movie, what I call as a wide cinema screen or a white canvas on which you're painting. So each soul consciousness is painting their own life, except that we have to know how this whole framework is designed, which is where I think the laws of matter, laws of spirit, and God Speaks helps us. Today, we are very fortunate to have the laws of matter scientifically explained, and that helps us to lead this material life much more efficiently rather than having to use physical labor. So, actually, we as a species now are very lucky to have this advantage of focusing more time on our spiritual aspect, the the reality of creation, which is one we call as divine love, right? That is the whole purpose. The whole creation came out of love, and as we know from Lover and the Beloved, love must love. So when you're looking at Eastern reincarnation in the East or in the West, as a male or as a female in different cycles of time. It can be Satya Yug, Dwapara Yug, Treta Yug. All of us could have been American Indians, Native Americans, Europeans, God knows whatever. Like. But it doesn't matter. It's just like even in this life, we don't even think about our childhood, maybe some things that we remember as a form of nostalgia. So if we take that same analogy about our past lives, it doesn't matter because what matters is right now, what is it that we want to do? So I think this particular chapter paragraph is clearly giving us the top-down approach about what we are, what is the purpose of the soul, and so on and so forth. So I think everybody has to go through all kinds of experiences. That is the whole purpose of this creation is the soul's consciousness, the drop soul consciousness has to go through all kinds of experiences, what we call as dualistic experiences, and come to the conclusion that we are all one self. So we know this theoretically now, thanks to Baba, but now we have to experience it. And that is why we are going through this process of reading and, contemplating, introspecting, reflecting, and executing in our life. So that's just my, short synopsis of this.
Yeah, Jai Baba, thank you.
It's well explained. Maybe we got to make a individualized program to, once we know the theory, as you say, bridging the theory with practice.
Exactly. Different strokes for different folks, but it's just like a game of cricket or any sports. You have to know the rules of the game, but each player is going to play their own unique style. So what I call is we have to play with sportsmanship or sportsman spirit without taking any penalties, what we call as sanskaras, spending sanskaras. The only thing we are doing out here is intelligent action, which is unwinding sanskaras. Devo.
Okay, we start with the next subtopic.
Cycles of existence. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. The facilities afforded by male and female incarnations are not really invariable. They change according to the cycles of existence, as well as whether the incarnation is in the east or in the west. In some ages, men are more active, energetic, and materialistic than women. In other ages, the reverse is true. In the past, the women of the East were brave and intellectual. They considered no sacrifice too great for the happiness and well being of their husbands, and their spiritual humility extended to looking upon the husband as God Himself. Now, the Eastern Hemisphere, the average man has a greater spiritual inclination than the average woman. Just as in the West, the average woman of today has a greater spiritual inclination than the average man. A man living in the East is different from a man living in the West. A woman living in the East is different from a woman living in the West.
So what era are we living in now? The woman and the man, what's the relationship?
Only thing is, we should be careful that you don't get cancelled by the woman movement. Me too.
Yeah. The joke is that in comparison with members of the opposite sex, the same soul shows varying degrees of superiority, inferiority, or equality with regard to spiritual or material matters, depending upon the cycle of existence, the sex of its body, and the earthly sphere in which it takes an incarnation. Yeah.
What I want to comment here in this last paragraph that you read. Look at the number of variables. You as a soul consciousness will have the male or female gender, which is the sex part. Then you will have a personality, which is either a superior personality or of an inferior type, or you regard everybody with equality. And then you also have, this is regarding either with spiritual life or material life. That is why with regard to spiritual or material matters. And then it also depends on the cycle of existence. Whether you are in the Satya Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, or Kali Yuga, whether you are in the West or in the East, and the earthly sphere which takes an incarnation, which is basically the earthly sphere is whether you are in the East or in the West, Oriental or Occidental. Sex of its body is male or female. Cycle of existences is the 4 yugas you can think of. And then you have these 3 different qualities: superiority, inferiority, or equality. And one more thing I want to say is in the prior paragraph, the first line, because I'm using the text here, the facilities afforded by male and female incarnations are not rigidly invariable. They change according to the cycles of existence, as well as whether the incarnation is in the east or in the west. So what I want to emphasize out here is this word facilities, because you will come across this word again in another chapter. Because the most important thing what you see is, I call it in modern technology terms, the male gender's hardware and software, and the female gender's hardware and software are different. So for example, the female can only give birth, okay? And then later on, we will read about how the male gender, being a male, is more superior, having the, what do you call, men are superior in terms of mind and intellect, and women are superior in terms of their heart, intuition, kind of thing. So that is why this word facilities is a very important word. And also it means that one has to go through both male and female incarnations, irrespective of who you are, where you are, to experience, the consciousness has to experience both the facilities of male and female gender. And then one can go through the so-called liberation, Jai Baba.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Ashok.
Yeah, I think given the importance of the last paragraph, you would like to highlight that part, or you can read it again.
Sure.
If you don't mind. I would like to read it again.
Sure. Before that, I have a question on this, the para prior. So like I was saying, what era do you think we live in? Does the woman, as characterized by Baba, is the woman brave and intellectual in the East over the West? Or are we seeing a greater sense of equality? Where do we think we are in the cycle?
Karthik, if I may answer that on a very practical standpoint, it is in a stage of transformation. You can't classify it, because now with number one is the supersonic travel, air travel, and then also with the World Wide Web. So now, I mean, a lot of things are changing, uh, evolving. So I think that differentiation which was there before is getting mixed, and people are available, or they travel, uh, I mean, either physically or through the technology. So it's all getting mixed up, and you can't have a differentiation as such. But the bent of the East towards spirituality and the bent of the West towards materialism still continues. And as regards the women and the man, it is evolving and changing, is what I feel. You can hear about karma.
Okay, Jai Baba, my observation is that, first of all, whether you're born in the East or in the West, Oriental or Occidental, as a male or female, is dependent directly on your sanskaras. Okay, number one. Number two is that consciousness focused on a spiritual life or a material life, which is dominant? Again, it's based on prarabdha sanskaras. So what Baba has said in a different chapter is, people who are born in the East are much more spiritually conscious, because they have probably finished with the material aspect. Vice versa, people who are born in the West need to go through the material aspect before you can step into the spiritual part. That doesn't mean, because I know a couple of friends that I studied in IIT and all, who are basically more westernized. They are much more inclined towards the West in terms of their material life. They do behave like an Occidental person. So it is an aspect of your sanskaras. But one thing I can tell you is, yes, the East is more spiritually conscious compared to the West. And also the women in the West now are probably much more spiritually conscious than the men in the West. Because I've seen a lot of these near-death experiences, channels, mediums. 80% are the female gender in the West. So as we know, Baba traveled, he's the only avatar we know who has gone around the globe. So there is the meeting of the East and West. So in that sense, yes, whatever is said out here is correct, Jai Baba.
Okay. Well, this is correct. As in, woman in the east or the woman in the west? Think is contrary to what we're reading here.
Karthik, sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said,
We couldn't hear you. Yes.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I said whatever you said, I thought was contrary to what's in the text, comma. So if you see eastward, so you're saying that the Western woman is more spiritual today? Is that the point? Comma?
No, the Western woman is more spiritually conscious compared to the Western man.
Okay.
And probably the Western, Eastern, Oriental men are more spiritually conscious than the Oriental, Eastern woman, because most of the women I know who have gone to the US don't want to come back. And even with the senior citizens, the men prefer to live here in India compared to the women. It's just an example, okay? It's a crude example. But on another note, if you read the holy signs of Yukteswar, there is this 80-20 rule, where Satya Yug, 80% people are spiritually conscious, 20% are non-spiritual. And then Kali Yuga is the opposite. 20% are spiritually conscious and 80% are materially conscious. So today we are seeing in India that more and more people are actually focusing more on the material aspect than on the spiritual aspect. Okay? This is my observation. Yeah, Baba.
Of course, many
Again,
masters.
again, your voice is broken. Your voice is broken.
Yeah, I'm far away from the computer. Sorry. Yeah, is this better now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I said that's interesting that you say Ikteshwar talks of numbers. So that's interesting that 80-20, or rather the domination of spirituality over material folks is mentioned by Ikteshwar. Last but not the least, I think many masters have mentioned, including Baba, on the spiritual push, increasing the overall penetration or increase in uh, absolute and relative numbers of people that will enter spirituality, right? So that's a given. Ashok, you were saying something.
No, I say, of course, Baba has written this and it has got some significance, but if you go by numbers, things are in a state of flux and changing, and also orientation is changing. Like the earlier the East was purely more spiritual than material, but it's changing now. If you see the consumption, if you see the figures, so I mean there is a blending of East and West, and the distinction is getting more uh, opaque. It's not clearly that okay, all the domination of the East as spiritual remains, but the percentage of people who are getting materialistic in the East is also changing. So I'm saying it's in a state of flux. There's a constant change happening. Those
Jai
are
Baba,
those
one
are
thing I have to say is that the Baba has said this is the end of the cycle of cycles. Why? This is the first time we can say that there's a shift in consciousness from the analytical reasoning mind to the age of intuition. Why? Because today everybody has a smartphone, everybody has access to both material knowledge and spiritual knowledge. And third, Baba traveled around the world and we are seeing the meeting of the East and West. So there is this blending that is happening. So one can, as Ashok said, that, it's a gray area, but we are seeing this mix happening where previously the East was spiritually conscious and the West was basically, if you look at Europe and all those places, yes, they had Plato and all those people, but still it was very much material because most of the East is where the prophets are born, and India has got a 10,000, 20,000 year spiritual background as such, the ecosystem. So I think that we are definitely going through a big shift now, and we have seen World War One, World War Two, and probably there will be World War Three, depending on what's happening now in the next 5 years will tell us. But definitely there is going to be a new era after this so-called suffering, apparent suffering that we are seeing today, not only with people who are materially well off, because I'm seeing that even people who are materially well off are having a lot of psychological problems because they don't have a sense of direction, what to do next. So that is the biggest challenge now today in the world, because it's not about poverty or a lack of food, shelter, or clothing. It is the distribution of economic resources now that we are seeing. And there has to be a big shift in that. And that can only happen when people understand the spiritual quotient of human life. Hey, Baba.
Absolutely true. People need to
Basically, if I can put it in 3 words, it is the new world order.
Yes, correct.
Absolutely. So let's just go to part 5, before which we'll just see the uh, subtitles. Facilities of male and female form. So we explore this further after touching upon it on the male and the female forms. Male and female incarnations are equally indispensable. Unity of subject and object. Mind retains the experience of incarnations, past incarnations. Genesis of sexual entanglement. Where does it start? Understanding through detachment and freedom from sex-ridden imagination. Like there. Reconciliation of conscious and unconscious mind, and then finally divine love, right? So those are the subtopics here. If you
You want
don't
me to
mind,
read?
Ashok, yeah, that'd be good because yeah, thank you. Great,
All
go
right.
ahead. Your audio is coming through fine. You're on Wi-Fi. You're on a roll,
Yes.
Kama.
Thanks to my brothers, brother's house. I have Wi-Fi, so
Oh,
let's
you're in
be
Chennai.
and this is one of my favorite chapters. Okay, and I'll tell you why
Okay.
later. Okay,
You're in
the need
Chennai?
for me. Yes, and
Nice.
tonight I'm
Okay.
leaving for Kumbakonam, for a couple of days, 4 5 days, and then I'll be back. I'm back for Silence Day. Hopefully, I'll see you guys July 7th. Whenever
Okay. Give my regards to your brother.
will do. Okay, the
Yeah.
need for male and female incarnations, part 5. You've already read the subtitles, right?
Yeah. But just read them before you start each para.
Absolutely. The subtitle: Facilities of Male and Female Form. Though the facilities afforded by each sex vary according to the age and place in which the incarnation occurs, each sex affords special facilities for the development of experience along specific lines. The lessons readily learned in male incarnations may not be easily attainable through female incarnations, and the lessons readily learned in female incarnations may not be easily attainable in male incarnations. As a rule, men excel in qualities of the head and will. They are capable of sound judgment and steadfast purpose. As a rule, women excel in qualities of the heart. They are capable of intense love which makes them welcome any sacrifice for the loved one. It is because of this capacity of woman for love that in devotional references to the avatar, the name of a woman is often given precedence, as when bhaktas or devotees of Rama or Krishna sing of Sita Ram or Radha Krishna, Mary Jesus, Mehra Meher. Okay, go ahead. Any
Wonderful.
comments?
One, wonderful. I think this, which I think we agree, right? The women are better on terms of compassion and love. Hello, Meher Kiran. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, welcome.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, sorry, I'm not regular. Jai Baba.
Yeah.
It's
No,
okay.
not at all. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Yeah. Ashok, you're saying something.
Yeah, I'm saying something. It was telepathy because I was also thinking of Meher, which Kama very beautifully added.
Sneaked in the end, which is absolutely correct. Thank you.
But you know, it is telepathy, and I was thinking about the same when he read. Jai Baba.
Wonderful. You're the same soul, bro.
So,
Yes.
right, we are the same self. That is why we all
Exactly.
technically think alike or do like things. But again, I want to emphasize here the first line here, though the facilities afforded by each sex vary according to the age and place in which the incarnation occurs, each sex affords special facilities for the development of experience along specific lines. In the previous chapter, which we read, it said the facilities afforded by male and female incarnations are not rigidly invariable. They change according to the cycles of existence as well as whether the incarnation is in the east or in the west. So, in a way, both part this chapter and the prior chapter are like a continuation, you know. So, shall I
Yes, of
go ahead with the
course.
next subtitle?
Yes, please. Please.
Yeah, actually, there is no subtitle here, but
There's
the
no
next one. So,
subtitle,
in
yeah.
qualities of the heart, women are usually superior to men, and in qualities of the head and will, and men are usually superior to women. The interesting point is that the same soul excels in the qualities of the heart or in the qualities of the head and will, according to whether it takes an incarnation in a female or male form. The alternate development of specific spiritual qualities goes on through the alternation between the male and female forms until the development is all sided. This is a very important paragraph
Beautiful.
to
Yeah.
actually tell us, and I think this should be taught to high school students, you know.
Yes. I think the recognition of when we were talking earlier, I was trying to say when you were mentioning about the materially successful people also struggling. It's not materially people also struggling. Everybody is confused and struggling who do not recognize the true values. And like you said, the youth are struggling when they don't recognize the true values that represent what their relationship with another female should be, what their relationship with their parents should be, what their so everything is linked to our academic understanding first of what we are, and then slow realization and living the true life and living the spiritual life completely, right? So that is the journey that everybody should get onto. And yeah, I think that's the only comment I have. Others? Yeah, let's continue.
Okay, subtitle Male and Female Incarnations Equally Indispensable. Since male and female incarnations are equally necessary for self knowledge, it is not right to look upon one as being more important than the other. Though there are differences between the nature of the respective facilities afforded by them, they are both indispensable. The soul must go through male incarnations as well as female incarnations if it is to have that richness of experience, which is a condition of attaining the realization that the soul in itself is beyond all forms of duality, including the accentuated duality based on sex.
Yeah. So the quick comment. I don't know what's this game that they have in in large social settings where you're supposed to go and make. Is it Queen of Sheba? Queen of Sheba is going collecting things, I think. Whatever it's called, but basically you go and get get a confirmation that you've been to each place and experienced something before you're done, and the first person to finish all of it is the winner, right? So in the same way, uh, the the uh, the soul has to experience all the aspects of Maya and what is afforded by the creative universe. And when you talk of the creative universe, 50% is in the female realm and 50% is in the male realm. So it's a necessary condition almost that you have to go through 50% of the experiences in the female form, 50% in the male form, and only then are you done, right? And that's what we are up to. But in the process, when you're so individually identifying with a particular body and a particular form, you create so many artificial boundary structures and rigor of rules that you treat the other badly or treat yourself unnecessarily superior, unnecessarily inferior, and so on and so forth. So it's almost a joke when you think when you get the sit back and look at the big picture.
Anybody else? Okay. Subtitle: Unity of subject and object. Before the soul is set free from all sanskaras, it assumes numerous male forms and numerous female forms. If the soul consciousness were to incarnate only in male forms or only in female forms, its experience would remain one-sided and incomplete. The duality of experience can be overcome only through understanding, and the understanding of experience is only partial as long as it moves within the limits of only one of the two opposites. Unity of the subject and object of experience is unattainable as long as there is in the object any aspect or element not fully covered by one's own experience. And this applies particularly to sexual duality. I'm going to read the last line again. Unity of the subject and object of experience is unattainable as long as there is in the object any aspect or element not fully covered by one's own experience. And this applies particularly to sexual duality. Any comments?
Yeah, I think from a language perspective, you're suddenly changing a frame of reference, which makes it a little complex to understand. But it's a simple thing. What is unity of subject and object experience? So I know in the last two chapters, or even the last 3-4 chapters, that's not the reference to the union, or that's not the reference to realization in the phraseology. So suddenly that has been introduced, so it may look complex, but basically the unity of subject and object of experience is basically referring to realization here. Is that correct?
Yes.
bigger
Because-
realization.
Because you are the subject,
Yeah.
and God is not an object of love, because God himself is the subject. That is why I use the term boils, Baba, our innermost loving self, or if you're a Krishna Bhakt, coils, Krishna, our innermost loving self. So you can use the Z, Zoroaster, Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Mohammed, Meher Baba, any one of those guys, any one of those operating systems, because the bottom line with all these so-called, what I call spiritual operating systems, what we call as religion, is for the same union between the subject and the object, because there is nothing like an object. Without the subject, there is no object, because the subject is one who does who's the creator, preserver, and dissolver. That is the metaphysical aspect of this whole journey or Krishna Leela.
Jeva, if I may add, this line is also important. The duality of experience can be overcome only through understanding. And the understanding of experience is only partial as long as it moves within the limits of only one of the two opposites. That means, the male form and the female form in the world of duality is important, but it does, and especially even the last line which Kama read again. So basically, we have to be cognizant that the male form and female form are necessary, but the soul is much, much beyond all these, and the ultimate soul is supreme. That's what comes out to me.
No, Ashok, the soul consciousness needs to take the medium of a male form or a female form, because this is the divine theme. This is how the whole divine drama is structured with laws. So, yes, you're right, but technically, you can't do anything about it. That is why the word understanding comes. We have the 7 realities of spiritual understanding, but we also need to understand how the material world works, because the material world, which is the 3 spheres of existence, gross, subtle, and mental sphere of existence, are mediums for the soul consciousness to emancipate itself. That is why Baba says, don't get stuck in any plane or sphere of existence. They are just Maya. That is why it is said, don't be attached to the body, gross, subtle, or mental, or even to our relationships with our near and dear ones. They are all playing different roles in a soap opera. As we know from reincarnation and past life experiences, all of us are playing different roles within our own family and community. If I'm not incorrect. Hey, Baba.
Yeah, agreed.
So can I go ahead?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Subtitle: Mind retains experience of incarnations. The mind retains the gathered experience of male and female incarnations. Since the soul consciousness identifies itself with the body, the psychological tendencies that harmonize with the sex of the body find a suitable medium for expression. The tendencies that are characteristic of the opposite sex are ordinarily suppressed into the unconscious part of the mind, because the psychological tendencies do not harmonize with the sex of the body and find the medium of expression obstructive. When the consciousness of the soul takes a female body, the male psychological tendencies are, so to speak, held in abeyance, and only the female psychological tendencies are released for expression. In the same way, when the consciousness of the soul takes a male body, the female psychological tendencies are held in abeyance, and the male psychological tendencies are released for expression. I'll go to the next paragraph. No, sorry. There is a subtitle. So any comments here? Okay, Baba. Should I go to the next one?
Yes, yes.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to say something and probably I was not audible. I was trying to
You're not
say
audible.
there's one more analogy. Yeah, one more which I thought I should share. And you'll love this, Kama. It's basically the analogy of a computer game and levels, right? So there are
Right.
certain games where you earn certain privileges based on the levels you complete, right? So in the same way, the if you look at it in a male female binary, the male and the female are two levels in this computer game, and you have to finish both, and you have to explore all facets of both of these levels before you're done, and that's the whole life, right? So, and why is that? Simply because you need to see the aspects that are available only in the female form and experience them, and likewise in the male. So in that sense, you just go through both, right? So that's another analogy to extend what we were discussing, and something that you love, which is the computer game analogy. Yeah, please
Yes.
continue.
Yes. So again, to extrapolate what you just said, the important phrase here is the thing that is called about, since the soul identifies with the body itself, with the body, which is the sex of the body, the psychological tendencies that harmonize with the sex of the body, male or female, find a suitable medium for expression. The same thing can be said. What I'm trying to see here is another phrases in the first line of this chapter. Though the facilities afforded by each sex vary according to the age and place in which the incarnation occurs, each sex affords special facilities for the development of experience along specific lines. So there is a link between the word facilities, special facilities that each sex can afford us, and the term here, what we call as the psychological tendencies that harmonize with the sex of the body. So these are very important phrases that one has to know if we want to understand what is the female sex and the male sex. So the subtitle next is Genesis of Sexual Entanglement. Identification with the body involves identification with the sex of the body. It therefore implies a free play only for that limited part of the mind which is in tune with the sex of the body. Since the other part of the mind is repressed and latent in the unconscious, there arises in the conscious part a feeling of incompleteness as well as a tendency to restore completeness through attachment to persons of the opposite sex. By getting entangled with the opposite sex, the buried part of the mind that is not in tune with the body seeks some kind of expression through another. From this point of view, sexual attraction might be said to be a result of the effort the mind makes to unite with its own unconscious part. Sex is a manifestation of the ignorant attempt the conscious mind makes to compensate for the fragmentation entailed in identification with the sex of the body. This attempt to compensate for fragmentation is doomed to be futile, however, because it is not only based upon identification with the body, but actually accentuates it by setting into opposition the body of the opposite sex and getting entangled with it through attachment and possessiveness. Hey, Baba, go ahead. Comments, very important paragraphs. I would love to see the comments.
Can you read, please, this last paragraph again? Sex is a manifestation.
Sure.
From there to
Sex.
where you just finished the possessiveness.
Sex is a manifestation of the ignorant attempt the conscious mind makes to compensate for the fragmentation entailed in identification with the sex of the body. This attempt to compensate for fragmentation is doomed to be futile, however, because it is not only based upon identification of the body, but actually accentuates it by setting into opposition the body of the opposite sex and getting entangled with it through attachment and possessiveness. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the key words here, and I was just trying to highlight those, are basically compensate and fragmentation. Fragmentation to say that something that is supposed to be together has been broken up, and compensate is the attempt to fulfill that void, right? So, like you said, beautiful paragraphs that represent the reality of the male and the female attraction and the sex as well. I think your video is on by mistake, Ashok. Can you switch it off? Yeah. Uh, yeah. Is that correct, Kama? You
Any,
is there a good way?
any other comments? Okay.
What
Let
actually,
me read the
I like
next.
to make a comment. I like to
Go
make
ahead,
a
go ahead.
comment. So it goes back to previous paragraph as well, that the identification of the soul with the sex that has incarnate with is there, obviously. I am born as a female, so from the time that I am born, I identify as a girl. I like a toys, which is girly. I like to dress like a girl. I like this, that, all the feminine aspect of that this particular sex that I incarnate as. Then it looks like Baba says the other part, the opposite part, it actually gets hidden. It's in the subconscious mind, and which is a male part of me, right? It's already in subconscious mind, and the attraction that happens to that opposite sex is nothing but the manifestation to fulfill that masculine part of me, that I cannot reach it because it is ingrained or it's hidden in my subconscious. So all this attraction toward the opposite sex is to be fulfilled, the part that is deprived, okay, because it's already in subconscious by design. All this is by design, the creator already did it this way. But what is just occurred to me, it is a very fine point, that that even our attraction to opposite sex is not really complete. It's needy. It is for us to fulfill that part that is missing, so then we stay happy. You see? Well, that's all the obsession, and I think all this attachment, all this, I think it's coming from, because people are just crave for it, all these craves, because they want to fulfill the other side, but they don't know how to go about it. That's how I see it.
Any other comments?
To add to what you said,
Look, your voice is
to
breaking.
add,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry. To add to what you said, the possessiveness is already referred to by Baba, right? So this in the earlier paragraph, he says that this at what starts as the seeking for completeness, which leads to the counterpart, which has the potential to, or rather, the aspects which are incomplete in you, you seek in another form, and then after you get that, it also leads to possessiveness and attachment, right? So I agree with your comment. I just wanted to make one more comment that just sprung up in my head as we are seeing this whole thing. So if you look at male and female, it's if you apply some math to the whole thing, it's 50-50, right? So there is something, I have 50 coins, another has 50 coins, and we are trying to get to 100. Now, unfortunately, or let's say just by nature, there are few other life forms, physical bodies that have different from 50-50. So the tendencies based on past sanskaras can be less than 50 as well. So something is more for some people, something is less for some people. And that creates the variation other than the male and female form, which are very easy to define. So if you look at all the differences that we see in sexual orientation, those could be classified where the distinction or the distribution of the tendencies is not equal. So if the distribution is equal, it's male and female. And the awareness and the love and compassion that we can have to all forms is so much more when you understand it through the spiritual lens. Just another point.
Or to put it in another way, in numerical form, it has to add up to 1. Of course, if it's half and half, it's fine. But if there's orientation towards any other number, then it has to be fulfilled and be made 1. I think that the soul is only 1. And likewise, whatever orientation you have, sexual orientation, it has to ultimately add up to 1. That's again my mathematical or numerical mind working.
Okay. I'm going to give my comments after reading the next paragraph, whatever. Subtitle: Understanding through Detachment. When the soul is trying to overcome sexual duality through detachment from the opposite sex, it is paving a way for understanding the experience associated with the opposite sex from within. Then a man tries to understand a woman not through the eyes of the male, but through the imaginative reaching out toward what the woman feels herself to be in her own personal experience. I'm going to read that again. Then a man tries to understand a woman not through the eyes of the male, but through the imaginative reaching out toward what the woman feels herself to be in her own personal experience. In the same way, a woman then tries to understand a man not through the eyes of the female, but through the imaginative reaching out toward what a man feels himself to be in his own personal experience. So, paradoxical though it may seem, the form of the opposite sex prevents the true understanding of experience associated with the opposite sex. Detachment from the form, I'm not able to read
I'm sorry,
that.
can you roll it up, please?
Okay. Detachment from the form of the opposite sex facilitates true understanding of the experience associated with the opposite sex because it removes the barrier created by sex-obsessed imagination. This has been one of the most toughest paragraphs I have been trying to understand, but let me first wait for you guys to comment. Go ahead.
Can you reread it again? This because it wasn't rolled up, so I really got disconnected. I couldn't
Yeah,
see
I
the
think
word.
it's a tough
Can you please
it's a
read
tough
it?
paragraph. It's a good
Yeah,
idea to read
that's
it. Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
But Baba is paving the way for our understanding, so it's all related. Go ahead.
So,
Jai Baba. Yeah.
so
Jai Baba.
I'm reading it again, right? So, subtitle Understanding Through Detachment. When the soul consciousness is trying to overcome sexual duality through detachment from the opposite sex, the consciousness of the soul is paving a way for understanding the experience associated with the opposite sex from within. Then a man tries to understand a woman not through the eyes of the male, but through the imaginative reaching out toward what the woman feels herself to be in her own personal experience. In the same way, a woman then tries to understand a man not through the eyes of the female, but through the imaginative reaching out toward what a man feels himself to be in his own personal experience. So, paradoxical though it may seem, the form of the opposite sex prevents the true understanding of experience associated with the opposite sex. Detachment from the form of the opposite sex facilitates true understanding of the experience associated with the opposite sex because it removes the barrier created by sex obsessed imagination. Any comments?
Yes, I like to make a comment. Um, I've never seen this before. I mean, I'm just appalled how beautifully Baba explains this. Um, so when we read the other parts, it also appeared to me, and I didn't express it, that approach is very external. And happiness, Baba says, it's not from external, it's within. Happiness comes from within. And now he portrays it here through this concept of opposite sex and female and male and so forth. So here he opens up to reaching out to opposite sex from within. And if you really reach out to that person from within, then our selfishness does not get in the way. That I have to be satisfied. I have to have a pleasure. I have to fulfill this craving. That. We begin our to approach that opposite, like for example, I'm a woman. I begin to approach that male through the eyes of the male. In other words, uh, I begin to search as to who he is, not who I want him to be, not who is the person to fulfill my desire. That's the difference. That when we see those people, in other words, I think if we see this from within, we should really feel the oneness. So all that question of man woman thing, kind of eventually fading away. Same thing for the other sex. Baba says, if you're a male, you don't look at the person, in your relationship to fulfill your desire, or you don't have a sex obsessed imagination. You approach them from the detachment because you're detached from their form Once you detach from that form, you begin to look to have the more true understanding of the who that person is. Although it's the opposite sex, but it really doesn't matter. And the fine point here is we're reaching out through our imaginative way. That cannot be flawless. I don't think it could be flawless, but at least is better than completely looking at them as what they can do for me. What can they do for me? Instead of how I would see them. I would see them as who they are, like that. Well, if everybody would look at this like this, then there wouldn't be any problem of relationship in the world, I would say. Jay Baba.
Beautiful. So, quick personal comment. I'm glad we have at least some sense of balance by you joining in, though you were late, Mahu, on this topic, because there is importance for both the male and the female points of view to be brought in, more from a balanced discussion standpoint. And I'm glad you're in today. Coming to what you
Thank you.
said, you beautifully covered it, right? So what
Okay,
you
Jay
said
Baba,
is,
because of lack of time, we got only eight.
yeah,
Hello,
yeah,
Jay Baba, there are only 8 minutes. There are three
yeah,
more paragraphs. Let me finish it because if we read the three
yeah.
paragraphs, it will complete the chapter and then we can make our comments. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And before that, I just want to make I don't know whether you can call it funny or whatever. Somebody, a very close friend of mine, long time ago, 30 years ago, told me, this is just something to ponder for both sexes. A man should love a woman more than he understands her, and a woman should understand her man more than she loves him. So, with that, the subtitle Freedom from Sex Ridden Imagination. If one is transcending sexual duality and trying to understand the experience associated with the opposite sex, sometimes one actually exhibits the traits usually associated with the opposite sex. Thus, for example, some aspirants in the male body at one phase or another actually put on the clothes of women, talk like them, feel like them, and take on their habits. But this is only a passing phase. When inner understanding of the relevant experiences is complete, they neither experience themselves as male alone nor as female alone, but as being beyond the distinction of sex. The experiences connected with the male and female forms are both accessible and intelligible to the aspirants who have transcended sexual distinctions. I'm repeating this again. The experiences connected with the male and female forms are both accessible and intelligible to the aspirants who have transcended sexual distinctions. They remain unaffected by the limitations of either because through understanding they have freed themselves from the limiting obsessions characteristic of sex-ridden imagination. Next subtitle, Reconciliation of Conscious and Unconscious Mind. I call it subconscious mind. The completeness that the mind seeks is not attainable through attachment to other forms and their accession. It is to be sought within by recapturing the lost unity of the mind. Reconciliation of the conscious and the unconscious mind is possible not through sexual attraction or through other forms of possessiveness, but through non identification with the body and its sex. Again, reconciliation of the conscious and the subconscious mind is possible not through sexual attraction or through other forms of possessiveness, but through non identification with the body and its sex. Non identification with the body removes the barrier that prevents the amalgamation and integration of the total of experience deposited in the mind. Completeness within is to be sought by overcoming sexual duality and distinction, which accentuate identification with the body. Again, completeness within is to be sought by overcoming sexual duality and distinction, which accentuate identification with the body. The last subtitle, Divine Love. To be free from attachment to the opposite sex is to be free from domination of the sex of the body in which the soul consciousness has incarnated itself, thereby annihilating the majority of those sanskaras that compel the soul to identify itself with the body. The transcending of sexual duality does not in itself amount to the overcoming of all duality, but it certainly goes a long way toward facilitating the complete transcendence of duality in all its forms. On the other hand, it is equally true that the problem of sexual duality is a part of the problem of duality as such. Its complete solution comes when the wider problem of all duality is solved through divine love, in which there is neither I nor you, neither man nor woman. The purpose of male and female incarnations is the same as the purpose of evolution itself. It is to enable the soul consciousness or the consciousness of the soul to arrive at its own undivided and indivisible existence. Again, the purpose of male and female incarnations is the same as the purpose of evolution itself. It is to enable the soul to arrive at its own undivided and indivisible existence. Jai Baba, go ahead.
So, Jay Baba, basically the last paragraph gives us a solution that we move from physical love to divine love, and when once you have the divine love, then it is like it says that the wider problem of all duality is solved through divine love, in which there is neither I nor you, neither man nor woman. So basically, uh, if you if you are totally immersed in divine love, then that's the solution to it. And I also wanted to comment on this chapter, understanding through no, not the chapter, the subtopic, understanding through detachment. So basically, the path towards divine love is basically renunciation. So I'm just reading from that. Detachment from the form of sex, opposite sex, facilitates true understanding of the experience associated with the opposite sex, because it removes the barrier created by sex obsessed imagination. So basically, renunciation or complete renunciation, and you move your mind towards the divine love, are the way forward. I mean, I can key takeaways from this chapter. So it's really very important and significant that we take this to the younger generation. This I feel, because I deal and I teach younger people. I think they get confused, and this probably can remove their confusion. Jay Baba. Does it make sense?
Anybody else?
Any comments?
Okay. If anybody, okay, I can comment here. If anybody is interested, they can comment now. I'll wait for a couple of seconds.
I think Karthik was trying to say something. So,
Karthik, are you there?
No. Go ahead, Kama. Go ahead and finish your comment. Yeah.
Okay. So, based on my own personal experience, let me tell you, I think it's a very important chapter, because the most important thing, like I said, I have this phrase called God plays G to G, God to God, game of duality to get over duality. So that's just the big picture. Number two is that we have read the lover and the beloved from everything and nothing, which tells you about, the whole purpose of creation. God is love, and love must love, and to love there must be a lover and beloved, and God being one eternal, infinite existence. Who can he love but himself? And then you know the rest of the story. Because here, the last line that we read, the purpose of male and female incarnations is the same as the purpose of evolution itself, which is evolution, creation, evolution, reincarnation, involution, and realization, which is the purpose of evolution. What is realization? Many different ways: self-realization, self-knowledge, blah, blah, blah. It is to enable the consciousness of the soul to arrive at its own undivided and indivisible existence, which is clearly God speaks. That is, we are all drop souls, part of the oversoul, which is the ocean of divine love, and being like a hologram or a holographic aspect. There is no difference between the drop soul and the oversoul, except that we know that the Paratpar Parabrahma state one, God was unconscious of himself, and through this process becomes conscious of himself in state 10. So on another note, I was born in a very male family, all male friends, male cousins, male brother, in a very, and I had very less interaction with the female gender except for my mom and maybe one or two aunts. Then I went to college where, as you know, the school that I went to, IIT, where it was 95% men and 5% women. And then I worked in marketing, which was all men. And when I came to New York, when I worked on Wall Street, they were all men. So I had a lot of, confusion about how to relate with women. And the biggest fallacy I had was men and women thought alike, because nobody told me anything about the woman. And we didn't know much about the female anatomy as such. And so my presumption was, hey, we are just look different in terms of hardware and software, or basically hardware, but we all think alike. That was my wrong assumption because of ignorance. So another note, I noticed that men who have born in a very female, like for example, Tom Cruise had three sisters. I mean, he's a guy who probably I'm not talking about his marriages or anything, but especially men who are born in a very female oriented energy actually understand how to behave with the other gender much more than men who have not had that. And I am a victim of that. So definitely this understanding of the psychological tendencies or the facilities afforded by each sex vary according to the age and place in which the incarnation occurs, also the kind of family you are brought up in, the ecosystem you're brought up in. And, especially in South India, we are very conservative, as you know. Sometimes you're not even asked to go into the kitchen because the women are there. The men have to be separate. So there's all this confusion and contradiction, which I think has contributed to this misunderstanding between the male and female relationships, especially even now, even though we are all educated, so-called educated. The reason that men and women have so many problems in terms of interrelationships, marriage, divorce, etc., is because of this lack of understanding. And number two is basically what I've understood here is that the beauty about this chapter is that the soul has no gender, correct? But the soul to feel complete needs both male and female psychological tendencies. Unfortunately, because of the sex of the body, male or female, if you're a male, the female psychological tendencies are subsumed in the subconscious mind. And the same goes for the female, vice versa. So here it clearly says, for the soul to feel complete, it needs both male and female psychological tendencies, and hence the attraction between the male and female from a very spiritual point of view is to feel complete. Ideally speaking, what you call as a soulmate or soul family, whatever you call it. But Maya or ignorance, because of our evolution through the animal kingdom, where we see during the mating season where the males fight with each other to have this harem or whatever you call it, to have the female, you have developed this lust, greed, and anger, which is carried into the human kingdom. So here what happens, instead of because we have not been taught any of this. So naturally, because of your hormones and growing up, you have this attraction towards the opposite sex, because one part is procreation, because creation has to exist unless there is more people being born, like, should I thank Musk for whatever he's talking about? But the population of the world is going down, especially in developed countries. So what is happening to the male is basically both the male and female, because of Maya or ignorance, we get attached to the form of the body, especially the physical form. And that is where the trouble starts. Then you become obsessed with the sexual aspect and what we call as carnal pleasure. That is why the coarser desires are, one is the one of the five physical senses, touch and taste. Touch is about the carnal pleasure, and taste is the gluttony of eating food. So it's a very clear example that sexual duality is a very important aspect to be overcome, to be observed, to become not, I wouldn't call the word control, to become aware. And I think that awareness comes with being in the right family ecosystem where you understand the male and female psychological tendencies and so on and so forth. So in that sense, Osho had a beautiful saying, he said to become a plumber or electrician, you need a 6-month to 12-month certificate. But to get married and to have children, there's no certificate. And the other point is that the longest relationship you have as a human being is when you're a male or female is with your spouse or partner or companion, not with your parents, not with your siblings, not with your children, but actually it's more important than your professional career. But that is not emphasized. Our school education system does not teach us, especially in the East. So that's my point. I can go on and on. But the last paragraph, which talks about duality, it says there is sexual duality is part of the overall total duality that we have, right? But it's a very important aspect. It's almost 50%, because lust is a very challenging thing for a human being. And I've read in one of the Baba literature, and Baba was in Merazad between 1960 to 69. There were a lot of these Western devotees used to come. And there was one incident where this very beautiful Western woman was there. And Erich, who was, of course, with Baba, was mesmerized by her, And then later on, of course, Baba will ask, like, hey, what are you thinking? Like, stuff like that. And so he told Erich, look, yes, the body, you're looking at only the physical form. It's going to change after some time. We are just like nothing, as such. So there was a lesson out there. Don't get attached to the form, but try to understand and become aware of the female and male gender. And that's it. Jai Baba.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're way out of time, but I surely want to open it up to see if there's any other comments. It was a very interesting discussion and a very important topic. Like a few of you have already mentioned, I'm just hoping that more and more of the youth of the world, especially pre-marriage, pre-formal informal relationships, even just get exposed to more of this to be better human beings, be better in their lives, right? With that, I don't have any comments, but obviously I appreciate what you said, Kama, more because it was so personal and direct, because it applies to all of us, right? So all that you said was relevant and also experiential. Thank you so much.
Yes, Karthik, you have made a very important, comment that we should take it to the youth. So probably we can tweak this, this content to the, the impressionable minds, and so that they are aware that, it's a very important aspect they are aware of, and it can answer some of their queries and questions they have, and for which they are troubled, and there's no one to tell them.
Yeah. So if you look at the West, right, the West is today seized by accommodation and tolerance. And I don't want to use the term, but then the term is, I mean, I'm sure all of you have heard it, but basically everybody wants to be respectful of everybody else's rights, liberties, and so on. And I think we have swung the pendulum too far away. This the beautiful chapters that we are reading is what the world needs to get rid of this swinging of the pendulum towards libertarianism or excessive freedom and excessive respect for others, which is, I dare say, unjustified or unfounded on real basis, right? It's not really the way it should be. So once you determine the true values, understand your true nature, then you respect others. You look at the other in the right way, rather than say, oh, it's another, I just have to be very, very careful of saying anything because that would hurt the other person. Of course, it would hurt the other person, but understand who is the other, right? So anyway, that's just me.
Yeah,
Others, please.
that's
I
correct.
have one small comment to make.
Sure.
You know, as we are reading these discourses, I'm getting more and more convinced that all these are very interconnected. And you know, when we talk about the problem of the young generation and so forth, like you said, carrying a good value system and no, you know, having moral standard and beyond moral standard and clear understanding as to why we are here, what is the purpose of life, what is the aim of life. You know, naturally people don't ask those questions from themselves, and unless they get into huge suffering and a lot goes on, and then they just pause and stop and say, okay, what am I doing here? You know, like that. So it's part of, like, the last sentence, I would say. Baba said it's part of evolution. It's part of the evolution of consciousness. As that goes along and our consciousness expands and we have more understanding about who we are, then when we get acquainted with someone or we have relationship, we get clearly to understand who they are. And I like to emphasize that if we really go gender free, okay, in this point I may have a different point of view with JK, and that is, if we really go gender free, means look at this person as uh, as a gift of God and treat them so equally, you know, in terms of how the God view them, not how my limited self and my limited mind view them. Like, take them one step forward, you know, and because JK, those understand, you made a valid point about knowing how to treat one another. I am raised with 4 brothers, so I got to know how the male works, but still I had difficulty when I came to my own stuff. So, you know, those are very also, I would say it's very tricky. It's very, human psychology is very tricky. If we want to understand, if I want to understand what this male wants, is all imaginative. So it could be wrong, it could be right. It could be wrong, it could be right. But I'd say from what we know from Baba now, let's take it one step further. Let's treat it gender free, like equal consideration for all, and see what happens. Say Baba.
No, I think I'm just trying to open that phrase. I know, again, I'm sorry we are out of time, But Baba's already covered that, right? So what you said is, see, Kama saying from a practical standpoint, what you're saying is after full awareness. After full awareness, I'll just open that particular page. Just 1 second. Right. So paradoxical. Yeah, the experiences. Just 1 second. Sorry, it's taking time, but it's. When inner understanding of the relevant experiences is complete, they neither experience themselves as male alone nor as female alone, but as being beyond the distinction of sex. The experiences connected with the male and female forms are both accessible and intelligible to the aspirants who have transcended sexual distinctions. So what you're saying is you're there. Probably we all are not.
Beautiful. I didn't even know that Baba talked about it.
So it was just 2 paragraphs before. So it's already there, right? So it's just that when you recognize and get to that, then it doesn't matter to you at all. The way you look at it is completely different. So yeah, anyway, I think it was an interesting read, and good to have Kama read after a long time. JK is actually Kama Mahu. So he uses JK as Jivatma Kama.
Oh, Jivatma Kama. How nice. I didn't know that.
It should actually, technically, it should be Manavatma, but that's okay. Sometimes I can think like a subhuman species. But I want to say something here, just to extend on what now, a couple of things. One is that, when Ashok was talking about educating the school, the college students, I always had this vision because when I was doing my MBA program, we had this so-called stupid subject called business ethics, which nobody follows. So I have a new idea which I wanted to watch, called spiritual and material ethics, and for that using Discourses as a book, because it will give a top-down picture about how to focus on your material spiritual life and get material freedom and spiritual freedom, which is what is important today. The second part is, I want to apologize right here if people find this comment crude or obnoxious, but this is 30 years ago, a friend of mine who now, like he said, many years ago, he works for Google actually. He said, like, Kama, you know what? 30 to 40 years ago, water was free and you had to pay for pornography. But now you have to pay for water and porn is free. So that's a statement, something one can look at it from different point of view, but that's the state of affairs, as Karthik was saying, that extreme, these things that we see now, that the whole idea about the focus on the form, the physical form, how to look beautiful and blah, 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 without going inward, is one of the biggest challenges for the 21st century, actually. And probably this is just a transition. I think people have to go through this, and hopefully we'll all come to an Aquarian age, Jai Baba.
Baba will ensure that, but we have to go through it, like you said. Anyway, long past our deadline, so thanks for joining, and look forward to seeing you all next week as well. Avtar Meher Baba ki jai, and have a great week ahead.
Baba ki.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, everyone.
Jai Baba.